So Salesforce has already announced UCP support, Google One. It's already got an interface for ACP to feed the product catalog into OpenAI. But also making sure that the site is just ready in terms of your JSON LD markup, schema markup, trying to make sure that's all there out of the box. They are taking agentic readiness seriously.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-com strategy, technology and CX-focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gurd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-com strategy of leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This podcast is sponsored by WorldPay, and I'll introduce the guests in a moment. But today got a conversations coming back to platforms. When Paul and myself started this podcast 6 years ago, I think it is now, we deliberately set out to be agnostic to tech and cover all tech and discuss it meaningfully and objectively. And I'd realized a few months back that actually we haven't looked at some of the more enterprise platforms recently, and there is always change when legacy tech stacks modernize and evolve. And we're looking into the Salesforce ecosystem today and Salesforce Commerce Cloud. I think it's really important because Salesforce, which came from Demandware, or Demandware was the acquisition to drive Salesforce Commerce Cloud, has gone through lots of iterations. It's had huge amounts of large global brands on it. The disruption in the market created by Shopify basically owning the SME space for certain verticals like fashion and less complex models has meant that they've lost market share and they've lost quite a few high profile brands, but they still have a huge range of large global and more complex businesses on them, the same way that Adobe does. So I really want to have a pragmatic view on where is Salesforce, some of the issues it's had in the past, some of the I guess the objections people have to renewing on it or investing in it. How true are they today? What sort of business does it suit? What business doesn't it suit? And I've got no better guest today than someone who's got a huge amount of experience with the platform and with e-com generally through agency background. And that's Rob Smith, who's the SVP of Commerce at OSF Digital. Hey, Rob, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, James. Yeah, really happy to be here.
Thanks for coming on. And we said let's really get into the pros and cons and a really pragmatic view on the platform. So I'm really looking forward to this. I know you work with a wide range of clients. So do you want to give people a bit of flavor for who you are, what your skill set and focus is, but also the type of businesses and the type of projects that you guys work on?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, Rob Smith, SVP of Commerce at OSF. But I've been in the kind of e-commerce industry for a very long time and digital before that, really. So I used to run a business that built websites for all sorts of people, from kind of Red Bull's F1 team to Red Bull's X-Fighters to Laura Ashley, a long forgotten brand now to a certain extent. And the whole kind of remit. So I remember the very early days of e-commerce where you were integrating a payment provider, probably using PHP as a coding language, and the payment provider might have been called Protex, if anyone remembers Protex. So these are very early days, kind of 2005. So I've seen that full kind of iteration over time to the much more complex propositions that we've got today. And I think what you said in the introduction is right. I think we do a lot of work with Salesforce Commerce Cloud at OSF. OSF is also whole Salesforce ecosystem, so it deals with all the marketing aspects, service, agent force, whatever you want to kind of bring into play. And the kind of customers that we work with these days are still a wide range. So in the US, there are brands that are very large, but you've never heard of them, like kind of David Yurman or World Market or any of these kind of folks. But in the UK, we also equally work with some of the kind of more famous brands like museums, such as V&A and Tate, as well as, big brands like Superdry. And then across the world, we've got quite a few global brands that have that kind of bigger scale, such as kind of L'Oreal or Tiffany as part of the LVMH group, or, all of these kind of different things. So we've got this wide remit of experience, and I've been kind of on the inside of a lot of that recently. So I previously do have experience of stuff like the kind of Magentos as it was and that kind of thing. But I have to say I've been much more kind of Salesforce side for quite a few years now. So my exposure to the other platforms is more limited, but that's where you come in. You've got the rest of the experience there, James.
Yeah, I think, I was saying to you, the reason why I wanted to get you on is because I know that you've got a really good view on this. And when you're working and delivering projects, then you'll see the actual use of the platform versus, I guess, where maybe my head is at, having not worked on a Salesforce implementation for a couple of years. I have a view of where it was, but that's partial. And there are gaps in my understanding of just how quickly that they've accelerated some of their plans around, faster speed to market for launches, specifically on the SME market, which I predominantly work with, the adoption of agentic and how fast they've delivered those capabilities to market, cost models as well. And I guess to frame this conversation for everyone listening is previously where I've seen Salesforce lose out in e-com replatforming projects is cost is a big one, because historically I found greater flexibility around the license fee, where I saw people on 0.5, 0.6%. Then all of a sudden it seemed that was 1% plus. So that made a massive change compared to the likes of a Shopify or a BigCommerce.
Yeah.
And then it's also the complexity of the admin and the ability to self-serve within admin tooling to get things done versus needing a developer to help you. So those are the areas where I wanted Rob to come on and really challenge my preconceptions, but also give that honest view of like where it's at and the areas where it's really progressed versus the areas where it's still probably needs to sharpen up. So that's the outline. So let's start with where the Salesforce Commerce Cloud product from a B2C point of view sits today, where it sits in the market, and what its relative strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. So, I mean, it's, as you said before, it's never really been suited to an SME market, right? It was never built to be that. It was always built from the very start to be able to accommodate kind of multi-country, multi-language, multi-currency, all of these kind of different things, and be able to run from one kind of single instance, many different websites and many different locales, all kind of within one management interface. And it's still, a lot of its strength is still derived from that kind of area. I think, and it, for what it's worth, it still sits in that kind of upper right of Gartner's kind of magic quadrant, because it's actually been very difficult to challenge its kind of scale in that regard. So if you're a brand that does have kind of multi-country or at least multi-language and multi-currency, then it is something that it can support quite natively and in a well understood way, without any kind of copying or cloning of sites or kind of all of that kind of stuff that you might do on some of the other platforms. Now, some of the other platforms like a Shopify or whatever have caught up a bit with things like markets, but they're still not quite at that true enterprise level of management of those aspects. I think also from a revenue point of view, I wouldn't really recommend Salesforce Commerce Cloud, the B2C product anyway, for companies that are really turning over less than, say, 50 million a year kind of online, right? That's the kind of bar of where I might put it. Realistically, it's probably maybe a little bit closer to 100, right? That's the kind of area where I would say it plays better. But coming to your point about cost, where, there used to be some flexibility and then it seemed to jump up to kind of that 1% of GMV level. I think that was because quite a few years ago when Salesforce acquired Demandware, they thought it was a more premium product than a lot of the things that were in the marketplace. And I think, to be fair to them, they weren't wrong. The issue that we got is that they didn't realize when they were wrong, which was, say, I think COVID introduced a blip that was very difficult for people to understand, right? And I think that goes across all e-commerce. People thought this kind of upward trend would go on forever, that they saw in COVID. And lots of people got tripped up when it kind of stabilized, right? Or even dipped a bit. And I think Salesforce were just as conscious of that. So, but now in the past few years, they realized they need to compete hard. So you'll find in most of the kind of platform discussions, especially when there's Salesforce and Shopify in the mix, that they'll be incredibly close to each other in terms of the cost of the platform again, because they've realized it doesn't have that premium tag that it used to, and that has therefore lowered and come down. And I think if we just finish off the cost bit and talk about implementation, because the other thing that we've had leveled at us is that the implementation costs of Salesforce Commerce Cloud are higher than implementing Shopify. And I think at face value, it's quite easy to say that that's true. I think when you add it all up together in terms of, these more enterprise deals, they're closer than people think, especially when you add on all the little different bits and customizations that you end up doing by the end of the project that people didn't realize at the start of the project, because everything looked simple and easy to do, right? Because it's a good sales process that they run. But the other thing that we've got on our side now that we've been using more and more is an AI driven process, where, especially if it's a re-platform and someone's quite happy with their site, or if they've got some brand new designs in a tool like Figma, we can take AI and we can use AI to build a great majority of that front end code. And whenever we do a re-platform project, it splits down as kind of front end code is maybe 60% of what we're talking about, the interface, the checkout, the product pages, all that kind of stuff. And then the other 35 to 40% kind of thing is integration. It's integration to where does the stock come from? Where does the pricing come from? Where do the orders go? Where does all the status come from? All of those kind of enterprise bits. So because AI can obviously help the integrations as well, and does, but it plays a really quite strong role these days in the creation of the interface. So now that means that we can come to quite a lot of parity in terms of, or close to parity in terms of implementation costs. But I think it's still not the right platform for a lot of people. If you were a single country, say you just operate in the UK, and you're doing about 20 million online, I wouldn't recommend Salesforce Commerce Cloud. It's not the right fit, right? There's other platforms that can do that, especially if you're like, say, a fashion brand, and there's brands like, is it Centra that I've heard of before? It's quite a fashion focused commerce platform. Maybe that's a bit better because you can do more in that single platform. But the more you move up to enterprise, lots of other platforms are in play for orders, or a PIM, or lots of other different things like this. And you need something with a bit greater flexibility.
Ready to grow your business online? With WorldPay e-commerce, you can deliver fast, secure payments your customers love, backed by global reach and real people-powered support. Scale with confidence and enhance your customers' experience with WorldPay e-commerce.
So let's run on that cost bit, because I find there's a real dichotomy here, because part of the bits that give people some reassurance in what platforms like Salesforce offer, which is, I guess, greater governance in terms of how staging and production are managed through replication, some of the tooling around scheduling of content releases, and we'll come on to the interface bit and and the modernization of it first, because there are different bits, aren't there? But you have actually quite a lot of robust tooling and quite a lot of control and environmental control, which is very different in a SaaS world. SaaS by nature isn't set up to work in that way, but that does bring costs. So I'm really keen to hear from how you've seen it, because the last project that I looked at, Salesforce Meaningfully, in terms of versus other options, was for about a £120 million business. And one of the things that put off they had an in-house UX team, so they had senior front-end developers. So they're going to be doing a lot of release management themselves for like the front-end work. Yeah, and it was the process that would make it much slower for them to execute, even though the quality control was really, really good. So how are you? What has anything changed in there? Because speed to market is often one of the biggest criticisms that's thrown at enterprise platforms, basically.
Yeah. And I suppose things have changed. And I suppose one of the reasons why speed to market is incredibly important, right? But sometimes people, I think, confuse speed to market with the ability to see a site up and running within, 30 minutes or something like this, right? And no one's going to deploy an enterprise commerce site within 30 minutes, right? It's just not a possibility. And so we shouldn't confuse setup time with kind of overall speed to market, I think. And when we compare kind of big international rollouts, suddenly that speed to market doesn't look as bad as it did, because it can do all those kind of country bits and pieces as well. But the other thing that's kind of happened in recent times is that there's been iterations of what's called Salesforce's reference application, right? The thing that comes out of the box with Salesforce that you can customize to make your own. And you can alter every single bit of it. There are no limits. So unlike some other platforms where certain areas are locked down, there is nothing locked down. You can change everything that a customer sees. That particular reference application has gone through lots of iterations. And most recently, there's one that will be announced soon at Connections in June, which is a Salesforce event, that's currently in pilot, and we're building on it for customers, which I'm really confident is a great technical solution. So it's fully fledged. It's got all the PLP, PDP, basket, my account, all the different bits you need out of a reference application. But you can still, as I said earlier, use AI to bring your brand in really rapidly, so that you still got that fast time to market. And the technical stack it's built on is React as a kind of central piece, but it also now uses Tailwind for all the kind of CSS and UI and that kind of thing. And it's been hooked up to Figma, so that you very easily bring stuff that you've designed in Figma, if you're a UX designer, like you were mentioning just then, bring it directly from Figma through AI into that kind of React and Tailwind environment. Because one of the big criticisms previously of Salesforce was that it had a lot of kind of proprietary language in it, what used to be called ISML and lots of other different things, that meant that AI, first of all, couldn't use it very well. And also it meant developers had a ramp up time there to learn how to use these proprietary elements. Now, because that front end is in React, Tailwind, all that kind of stuff, it's stuff people already know. So you can hire very normal developers, and within a small period of time, they can be shipping productively. And that front end is also separate to the back end coding now, so that you've got that isolation. So in terms of governance that you were talking about before, your integration layer is quite safe in that back end set of coding, and your front end remains in a different repository, which also allows more speed and agility and different kind of DevOps for each part. And so that's improved a lot.
On the license point, so that's really interesting. You said that there's been some change there, because I know that it's like, how long's a piece of string, right? Because the exact license fee that you'll get charged will be dependent on many factors, including like size of business, complexity, what you need, how close to end of quarter is or end of year. But are you seeing sub 1% license fees as a more common thing now, or is the 1% limit still pretty much there? That's the kind of minimum you would expect to be paid?
No. I if anything, it's kind of the opposite of that. It's much sub kind of 1%. You were talking about different figures before, weren't you? That there was some flexibility around 0.5, 0.6. I've definitely seen that. I've seen a bit lower in certain circumstances as well. So they really changed their tune on that. They have realized 100% that that isn't appropriate anymore. They can't, because the other thing is, if we're very honest, with each other, commerce is becoming rapidly a bit of a commodity, right? Good commerce isn't a commodity, but commerce itself as a technical thing it's a solved problem. Do you know what I mean? In some ways, Agentic has changed things, and I'm sure we'll get onto that later. But your standard cart checkout basket, uptime, all of that kind of stuff is pretty established. So the idea that you can charge a high premium price for that kind of stuff is gone, and they know that.
Yeah. That's really interesting, because the project that I worked on, one of the main reasons why the client went away from Salesforce was that they wouldn't go below 1% on a renewal, and that just at the time put them so disproportionately expensive.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It was crazy. Interesting. And this is why I love these conversations, because we both know, right? Things change constantly in the vendor space. The commercial, BigCommerce has just announced a raft of price increases across its pay-as-you-go monthly plan. So you can get used to a like prescriptive view of, well, actually this won't be so cost affordable, and then all of a sudden it changes. The other area, so one of the other areas we're talking about is what's frustrated brands. What's changed where those frustrations are being removed, so Salesforce is recognizing doing something, versus where there's still an issue. The one area that I've always found really frustrating with both Adobe and Salesforce is they have so much functionality under the hood. I come from a Demandware background. I've worked with clients on Demandware, then into Salesforce, and Salesforce Commerce Cloud was basically just Demandware with a new logo.
Yeah.
But the admins are just not easy to use. Have they planning to any time in modernizing the UI of the admin to make it easier to use and execute tasks?
Yeah, so a couple of things have happened. So one of the bits of background that you might not know too much is that Salesforce did start quite a few years ago trying to build a commerce platform on their main core platform, right? They've got their B2B commerce platform. That's still there, and that's still a really great piece of kit for B2B companies. But they also started to build a kind of direct consumer one on the same Salesforce platform. And a few years ago now, they abandoned that effort because they realized that they just could not create the scale that Demandware had created in its infrastructure, right? Without it costing an enormous amount of cash. And as a result, what they've done instead is redirect all of that effort into the Demandware product. So there was a period of time, a few years, post-COVID kind of years, I would say, where the platform was underinvested in. And if you talk in closed doors to people, they will recognize that, right? It didn't change enough. And it's a common complaint of customers that Demandware is great, or it was great, but where's the innovation, right? That was always the question. Where's my next thing? What you told me I'm getting 8 to 10 releases a year, and I'm getting those releases, but what's in it for me? What can I use? These were the things our customers were saying. But the great thing is over the past couple of years, they redirected all that investment. So commerce, order management, quite a few different parts of that commerce portfolio all have double the investment that they used to. And in Salesforce terms, double the investment does literally mean thousands of engineers, right? It's a lot of people that are putting effort into the platform. And that's why this kind of much better front end has appeared. But over time, they've also modernized the UX of Business Manager. So it looks a lot more like Salesforce now. Well, I don't know whether that might be good or bad for you. I don't know.
I was in the marketing cloud piece.
More like
CRM.
a kind of, something like that, but more like what they call the Lightning Design System, which is more like their CRM kind of look and feel. And they've also started to modernize just certain parts of it, like upgrading certain parts of it to make it better. They need to be a tiny bit careful though, because they do have a lot of power users who really learned to use the platform. So you also can't go backwards. But the other thing I'm very excited about now, with all the agentic stuff that's coming along, is that where they're ramping up quite a bit of investment is what they call agentic merchandising, which is when you're in that tool, instead of having click, 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 find, look at this, do, you know what I mean? You actually just talk to it and say, I need to update this kind of setting and do this. And it goes off and it does it for you, right? Which is obviously that kind of assisted route is much more interesting, or, something around the lines of show me all the products that don't have this description or that description, or that I haven't looked at recently, or, these kind of ideas. And they will be opening that up to the partner ecosystem like us to build agentic skills into the platform, which is really exciting because we can make our own kind of accelerators and stuff like that on top of it. So I'd say, while I wouldn't say that that's a place of revolution, it is a place where things have evolved. And I've had good feedback from customers on the kind of improvements that have been made. And they do like it.
Yeah, the areas that so there are some areas I always thought, functionally, it's really good. The native content scheduling, the content slot scheduling.
Yeah.
Without the need for a headless CMS.
Yeah, that's
is
right.
Ahead of the publishing in the SaaS platforms, and without creating a custom like private app on top to do that piece.
Yeah,
that's really good. But the interface of it was always really quite ugly and not very fun. So I think it's good to hear that they're investing in that. The agent of it, I'm keen to push a little bit further on that, because I've been playing around, because I work with a lot more like BigCommerce, Shopify type projects at the moment. I've played around a lot with Shopify Sidekick, and you're right. I mean, that's how e-commerce teams increasingly want to work, is not to have to remember a path to achieve, right, I want to set up a discount to do X. Oh, I've got to go in there, do that, click these things. The ability to just, at the moment, it's all type-based, but in the future, it's going to be spoken commands, say, right, I want you to set me up a discount with 10% off. That's only for this customer. I don't want it to be eligible for shipping promotions. And that bit is really fascinating to see how it changes people's mindset of how quickly they can do stuff internally. How far has Salesforce got with the agents? Like, what are the practical ways it can be used?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it is areas like that they're targeting, right? Because it's the kind of high effort areas. So promotions is a relatively high effort area. One of the things we did recently as a hackathon, for instance, with AI, was that we, using Salesforce API, we extracted all of the kind of promotions out of a test site, and presented it as a kind of a calendar and showed where there were any overlaps or any conflicts or anything like that, because that kind of tooling isn't quite there yet. So that's an example of where we're kind of taking it. In terms of Salesforce, it is exactly those kind of things. So promotions is also, at one point they were looking into a kind of an agentic content builder, if that makes sense, where you could ask it to kind of build up a page and that kind of thing. They're still working on that as a potential. The only thing for them that they need to balance is that because of the enterprise customer set, well, I keep saying enterprise customer set, that's a broad range in itself, as you know. Enterprise of L'Oreal, who have, hundreds of countries and like 50 odd brands, that's one kind of enterprise. But, Superdry, who still ship to kind of, 25 countries and still have plenty of currencies and plenty of complexity, I still consider kind of more enterprise, despite their kind of mid-market revenue, maybe. But you've got to be careful because, as you said, the headless CMS thing, quite a lot of these people do come with a CMS. We won one recently in the US who were using Builder.io as a CMS, and they've got a really nice workflow from their UX team to the content being delivered, and they really wanted to preserve that. They didn't want to go backwards on the tool, and Salesforce's inbuilt tooling was not quite as good. But more importantly, they didn't want to disrupt their workflow. They didn't want to relearn another tool, But then I hear from another customer that actually that we won recently, where they want to go for Salesforce's content tooling because they did have a CMS, but they were only using 30% of its capability, and they needed to conserve cost. And I'm sure you've heard that people want to pull costs back. They want to lower the TCO of their platforms. They want to do all that kind of stuff. So yeah, plenty of different directions. And that's Salesforce's conundrum. How far do they invest in one particular area? So they always have to talk to all the customers. So where they've zeroed in is more on what the core platform does. So maybe slightly less content, slightly more promotions, merchandising, sorting rules, boost and bury, all this kind of stuff. So one just released is Agentic Boost and Bury. You can set it rules of what to boost and bury based on a few things, and it will do it.
Yeah, I think this is an increasing dilemma for the platform vendors, is which part of the user experience and the front end piece do they become best in class at within platform? Yeah. Because you have an ecosystem and you have partners, and those partners, obviously their income stream is selling solutions for product discovery, personalization, loyalty, whatever it might be. And the more you bake true high-end quality into the platform, the more you can alienate some of those partners, and it's a real balancing act.
Well, you've also got to charge for it, right? If you built it, you've got to somehow recoup that kind of investment and that kind of cost. So another example on the Salesforce side is that the other dimension you've got to think about with Salesforce is that they have a load of other tools that they sell, right? So Data Cloud is their kind of, or Data 360, I should say, is their, because Salesforce love to rename something, right? Is their best in class kind of segmentation, kind of data modeling, marketing tool, right? And it is really powerful, really good. I've spent quite a bit of time with it. So they won't use that. They won't create inside Commerce any kind of segmentation kind of tooling. All of that data will come from Data Cloud and then be used inside Commerce. Do you know what I mean? So they're very clear about where they're putting the boundaries. On the other hand, though, they're investing quite deeply. So they bought a company called Simulate with a C, Simulate.ai. And for people listening to this, they should go to West Marine, which is a They're a company in the US, but they have Simulate operating at the moment. And when you do a search, it's their traditional keyword search. But then there's a little button on the left that says Ask the Skipper. And the Skipper is Simulate, the Skipper is AI. But what Simulate has done really well is that they understand the product catalog, but then they build effectively an ontology, if you're familiar with the term. They build a semantic layer of knowledge on top.
Yeah.
So yes, West Marine is all about fishing products, but they build a layer on top that says, well, take this fish finder. What is a fish finder? Well, fish finders do this and they operate this way, and they use AI to fill in all those blanks of what it's used for. So that when you go on the site, you can say, I need a fish finder, but I don't know which one I want. And it asks all the right questions. It says, well, are you deep sea fishing? Are you ice fishing? Are you river fishing? Do you need it to locate? You need it to, how deep does it need? You know, I can give you all the examples, but it's a far superior way of searching. They've effectively cracked AI search, in my opinion, on-site search, and recommendations. And so Salesforce bought them. And so now that'll get folded into the platform offering, because they see search and recommendations as a key part of what they should provide. And a lot of customers are telling them they want to reduce costs by removing third-party recommendation engines.
Yeah. I can see this in other ecosystems as well, where the product is accelerating in those areas. For me, I think product discovery is completely the right area to go. It's not great for those who are running specialist product discovery engines, but it makes sense, because at the end of the day, the commerce platform is where you have your product data, and you want to be able to create the journeys that you want off the back of that platform with minimum extra tech.
Yeah. It is the very core to me of what a commerce platform should be, right? It's the product, it's the catalog.
Yes.
Because as we say, the checkout bit is kind of commoditized to a certain extent, right? It's, anyway.
Yes. So I feel like in other ecosystems as well, there's going to be some disruption there in the partner space. I was just laughing whilst you were saying that. I was looking at the West Marine Skipper thing, and I love the fact it responds with ahoy there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I could even hear it in the right tone.
It's full. That's right. It's full branded. But you'll note that it hasn't taken over their keyword search yet, right? They've left the keyword search there, and they kept this because they similar to how Gemini and Google are kind of testing AI mode, and whatever it is, because people will shift. But the shift is always slightly slower than we expect, but faster in the long term than we ever thought, right? It's that kind of weird paradox. Because the other thing I want to say about agentic, and where there's a lot of investment going, is making sure that the site, the kind of reference application, and also the kind of back end is ready for agentic protocols. So Salesforce has already announced kind of UCP support, the Google one. And also it's already got an interface for ACP to feed the product catalog into OpenAI, for what that's worth these days, since they decided to stop doing it. But you know what I mean? It moves fast, doesn't it? That's for sure. But also making sure that the site is just ready, just in terms of, JSON LD markup, schema markup, all that kind of thing, trying to make sure that's all there out of the box. So they are taking that agentic readiness quite seriously, because they want to be the platform of truth for agentic orders, and that's another thing that folds into your commercial thing that you spoke about earlier. If they would have kept the pricing really high, what happened with Salesforce customers is that they found ways to place orders around the platform. Do you know what I mean? So like if you had an in-store kiosk, they wouldn't be keen on Salesforce powering it, because it'd be more orders adding to that GMV total, right?
Yeah.
Whereas now on the much lower kind of approach, then people are a lot more open. So we have a big company in Canada called Dynamite, who've just launched in the UK actually, with a brand called Garage, I think they pronounce it. Multi-100 million kind of company that's using Salesforce to power all their native mobile apps as well, just using the API. Because that's another thing that Salesforce is probably different from your days when you were with it. It's always had a good API, but they've steadily redone it. So it's all on modern standards, modern REST standards and all that kind of stuff, compared to the older API. So that's also quite a cool thing.
Where do you think Salesforce is strategically headed? Because I like the fact that you position it as you need to be on 50 million plus, suitable to more complex enterprise. And we're not talking this is about systems architecture, operations, not just about size of business.
Yeah.
So I think that's clear, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But where are they headed? Well, one area you've alluded to with Simulate and the search and making that a core capability of the platform, but where else are they focused strategically in the roadmap? Are there specific pillars where they are properly going after with this expanded engineering team?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've covered quite a few of them. So obviously AI and Agentic is one. And as a kind of extension of that core capability of kind of search recommendations, that kind of area. Trust is still a big one. So trust and scale. It's always had a reputation for never going down over Black Friday, always scaling to customer needs. And they will continue to preserve that even in an agentic era where things can really speed up potentially, depending on what kind of hype cycle you're kind of looking at. I think tooling for business users is still high with the agentic merchandising that we were talking about. But then the final piece is also what we have talked about quite a bit, which is around time to market. So before, a lot of the kind of onus on getting the platform ready was on the partners like us in terms of speed to market. But they realize the more they can build into the product and kind of, we used to do these 10 things always in a project. If those 10 things are already done, even better, right? So we can all go a little bit faster. So as an example of that, they've been spending quite a bit of time on producing, I mentioned that we've been using AI to do all the front end build of the interface. We're quite ahead on that, but Salesforce is also doing some of their own stuff that they want to give to all the partners because they want to raise all the boats so that things go a bit faster in terms of projects, because they want to make sure that they protect their kind of upper mid-market and enterprise position, right? Because one of the fastest growing segments in Salesforce is enterprise is still growing really fast, but that kind of mid-market area is also growing really quickly, right? And we can't forget that Salesforce is a bigger ecosystem. So when they go in, they don't want to just sell commerce head to head with any other platform. They normally want to say, well, have you also solved your data problem? Because we've got Data 360. What's your marketing tool doing? Is it as well integrated as our set? You know what I mean? So it's much more of and you find that people get much more kind of benefit and return on investment the more Salesforce products they have that are closely aligned together. It's not for everybody. But I think you and me saw that era where people were building everything kind of super composable, right? You had a platform for this and a platform for that and a platform for this. And there was huge amounts of API integration, wasn't there, to try and get anything to work. And the projects ended up being 24 months long, and I think that era is gone. All the CFOs are kind of going, how can we reduce cost across our marketing technology, across our commerce technology, not just on looking at this platform. So Salesforce is going to concentrate on its core competency. I think it's still going to stay pretty close to working with partners for other things. So it's got a strong partnership with Stripe, strong partnership with Adyen. It's not going to try and be a payment provider anytime soon, as an example, which is different to other platforms. So I just think that's about where it's positioned. Yeah.
In terms of like you as a solution specialist working with different clients, what are the key areas where people go, I really wish it did this better? Because if I look at, having done a lot of projects recently with BigCommerce and Shopify, in BigCommerce there are certain things around the page builder and the usability there. There's around smart collections and the fact that you have to assign products to categories rather than creating rules that auto do. Shopify is like lack of B2C price lists that have been coming for ages but have never arrived, and you can do discounts but it's not the same as true price lists. So in each ecosystem you've got things where the platform excels at and you've got these little annoyances where it hasn't caught up with demand. What would be some of the key functional ones where ecom teams go, just this is where I want it to be?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think there's a couple of things with that. And both of them, they are addressing to a certain extent, but I quite like it to speed up a little bit. So we mentioned about agentic merchandising and all that agentic tooling. I just think there's a I was going to say a gold mine there, but effectively there is a big opportunity there to make the lives of all operators and merchandisers and whatever better. Yeah, because there's still a lot of donkey work that goes on in all platforms, including Salesforce. And tied in with that is the interface, like you said before. Like the promotion engine is exceptionally powerful, but when you first see that promotion interface, you're like, "Woo, there's a lot going on there," right? To get my head around. So that'd be one thing. The second thing is the double-edged sword of content tooling. Because on the one hand, I've got kind of half the customers at the moment saying, well, we don't need any of that because we're going to use Optimizely as our kind of CMS, and it's going to do our mobile apps, it's going to do our website, it's going to do everything. Or, Builder, like I mentioned before, or Contentful, or whoever, right? They're already set on that. And then the other half of the customers, broad split, are just like, I'd really like to use Salesforce's content tooling. And at that point, I'd just like it to be a tiny bit better. They're working on it. They've got a new version coming, but it's not for a few months yet. So that's a small frustration of mine that it's not quite as good. For a lot of customers, they're like, that's good enough. But it's because they're coming from a point at the moment where the market is saying, take cost out of the platform. But we know how fast the market changes sometimes. Suddenly it'll be back to best of breed or back to, you know what I mean? People talking about third-party CMSs again, and that's when it needs a slightly better answer. So they're probably the two places, I'd say.
Okay, interesting. But I really appreciate you coming on. It's been interesting to hear how they're evolving and where they're focused on. And I knew they'd invested in the engineering resource to speed up the roadmap. I didn't realize it was that significant. So that's an interesting one. And it's I think it's nice for people hearing your objective viewpoint on the type of business and the type of market that it's suitable to. Yeah,
I think a lot of people have a quite fixed perception of what it is, and I'm not saying some of that isn't right, but particularly when it comes to pricing, and particularly when it comes to the label of it's still just Demandware and they've done nothing. Those two things are worthy of a second look now, and what we're seeing quite a lot of is there's also a final shift happening where enterprise platforms such as ATG and Hybris, SAP Hybris, are finally coming to end of life, right? HCL, all of these original platforms that you remember from the enterprise days, there are still plenty of customers that are hanging on to them because obviously they think the cost change is huge. And in my experience, Salesforce is pretty much prime position for a lot of those things because it has both the enterprise scale and the modern technology kind of mixed together. Do you know what I mean? So for a lot of people, it'd be worth a second look. Obviously, you should do it with OSF as well, but I shouldn't have to say that.
We know what you've done really well. We said when we were planning this that the one thing we don't want to do is evangelize, and we're just really going to focus on objective. And I like the fact you've evangelized right at the end.
Well, I've got to say something, haven't I? Otherwise, my sales leadership would just be like, "What are you doing?" But all customers who know me, I say exactly like it is, whether anyone's there or not. So
yeah, I know that was tongue in cheek, but equally though, if those of you listening are working in that more like enterprise environment and want to get a potentially more detailed and nuanced view of this, then Rob's details are on the landing page. You can also connect with him on LinkedIn. He's a generally good person to connect with in the industry, so I highly recommend it. But yeah, thanks for taking the time to come on and give that perspective on the market.
No problem. Great to feature, James.
Cheers. And thanks as always for everyone for listening. Do reach out to myself or Rob if you've got any questions, and keep your ears peeled for next week. You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gurd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-com strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.